Hello, class. Professor Cisneros here, and we're here to talk about week 5, a little bit about the current week 6, as well as assignment 1. So, in week 5, you had Deidre, who was confronted with a situation of low enrollment. And to begin with, hopefully, it never gets to the point to where the, the enrollment or the situation, the circumstances are this extreme and dire. But the way that we put this together, we wanted to be sure that there was a clear understanding of what can happen, because this does happen, happens with the vast majority of studies that you're going to encounter, and the best way to address it. So in this circumstance, you had Deidre, who put together a root cause analysis and an action plan, and then a monitoring plan. Went straight to senior management, presented the plan to them. They approved it, went back, and then had a meeting with her CRO. And of course, you were to evaluate how she managed that entire situation. And for the everybody did very well with that. The real life circumstances of something like this occurring is going to be much more nuanced. Now, having said that, it is very important to have a strong, collaborative, respectful relationship with your CRO partners, if that's assuming that you are on the sponsor side. Many of you will either at some point in your careers be on both sides, but if you are on the CRO side, you'll never realize how important that relationship is. It can be very demoralizing if you're on the CRO side and always having to walk on eggshells. In a situation like this, she didn't give them enough time. She only gave them 3 days when she sends out the plan and expects everybody to jump at her at all of her requests and come up with great ideas. But when it's kind of a very tense situation, the stress does not lead you to explore all of the different possibilities and the ways to address such a situation. As you all had said, to begin with, she should have gone to her CRO partners and said, "Listen, this is the situation. Let's start tossing around ideas as to how to best address this," and then put something together, and then gone to senior management, because she would have had buy-in and would have utilized all that experience and insight from her CROs, or I guess her CRO partners. They're closer to the sites. They are, and so they're going to be seeing things that as a sponsor and sitting in your office or at your desk every day, you're not going to see. So she failed to do that, and as a result, she's not necessarily going to have buy-in, and it's going to be a little bit of an embarrassment if there are aspects of it that members of her CRO team would have seen that is not going to be effective or not going to work, and then she's going to have to go back to her senior management to make adjustments. So had she done that, she could have potentially saved herself that that level of stress, that level of having to retract some of the aspects of a plan that may have been doomed from the beginning. The other side of that, of course, is as a member of the CRO. So Michael, how should he have responded once he received that invite and recognized the tone of that meeting? He also has a responsibility, albeit it's certainly less than Deidre, because Deidre, the tone of the team starts with her, just like the tone of any company that you work on starts at the top, and it all filters down. But within the team itself, it starts with her. So Michael may have not been as brave, or as may not have felt as empowered to come to her and say, "Listen, we need to step back a little bit from this," and being able to have an honest conversation with her. I know I get the best out of my teams when I do have, it's just in my personality, have that type of relationship where they can call me and and say, listen, we've got a problem before before it gets big while they're trying to solve it themselves. We are all part of it, and we know that with all the experience that we have, that these things happen. And she doesn't do that, and they're not going to be the CRO partners are not going to be as encouraged to try to help her and want to work for her. So that was the big takeaway in that situation, and for the most part, you all did very well. Let me see. So going on to week 6, it's we're going to be talking about creating a positive decision-making environment, and that's everything I've just described. Uh, Generating potential solutions, and then having a decision. And it is always very important to actually make a decision, because the only thing worse than making a bad decision is making no decision and nothing happens. You can recover and learn from bad decisions. There's nothing to learn other than something should have been done when you don't make any decisions at all. Take the best situation with the best knowledge that you have at the time, and explore it. Don't overanalyze it, because that, again, you're not making a decision when you're doing that. And to decide, go forward, follow up, monitor, and of course communicate that decision out to everybody. That's also a big problem in many institutions, and in just about every environment and every team I've worked with, is how you communicate out firm decisions. And so that is just as important as actually getting everybody together and actually going through and making that decision. That environment, that positive environment in which the team feels empowered and doesn't feel threatened to actually come up with ideas as to how to address a particular situation. A lot of them are not going to be viable. Obviously, you have to go only, for the most part, in one direction, but to toss around ideas and don't let people feel threatened to do so or make them feel stupid is always extremely important. Getting back to assignment 1, or changing over to assignment 1. So the problem that you had here was low enrollment. Again, a very common problem. And you all were to put together a number of ideas as to how to address that. In this situation, I was more concerned about how you presented the ideas and whether or not you could defend them. More so than whether or not I agreed as to whether something would actually be effective. So, but having said that, let me talk about what I feel is going to be very effective, or at least the most effective in a situation like this. So if you have low enrollment, we had very few open sites. First thing you have to do is find out why those sites are not getting open, and you have to attack that situation. You've got to get those sites open. You're not going to enroll patients in sites that are simply not open. So that's going to be solution number 1, because you're not going to have to adjust the budget. You're not going to have to adjust or look at the protocol, the ICF, or anything else. This is something that should have already been happening. Why is it not happening? Some of the other ideas, which in a situation like this, and the one that was presented, were viable. It's most of the time it's not going to be, because and I'm moving into the protocol, and the scenario was presented in such a way that adjusting and reviewing the inclusion exclusion criteria, because there were so many, is a reasonable idea. Most protocols should be well thought out, and so that way amendments can be avoided. Amendments are going to be very expensive in all kinds of ways, everything from human resource to the cost, delays. And so if you have a mess of a protocol, that's what you're going to end up with. So there has to be a lot more energy put at the front end in developing a protocol. But in this situation, it's a completely reasonable idea. Some of you wanted to bring in the investigators. That's an idea that I would avoid, only because it's going to be a situation where you're essentially herding cats, because everybody has their idea and it's going to apply to them locally, and then they get their feelings hurt if their ideas are not implemented. You have some out of the company consultants. Sometimes they're KOLs that are actually acting as investigators as well. And a KOL being a key opinion leader, somebody who really has a lot of insight and a lot of experience, is well thought of in in that therapeutic area community. And so you're going to be looking at them as well as taking advice and the experiences of everybody on your team. So that's usually the team that's going to be putting all of the inclusion-exclusion criteria together, and then exploring exactly why you need them, why you need every single one of those things. Now, do amendments happen? Absolutely. What you have to do is just try to avoid them and applying a lot of time and energy at the beginning. Another option that a lot considered that was fairly reasonable was adjusting the language in the ICF. Again, completely reasonable, but it requires a lot more effort than many people believe. Reducing the reading language from, say, 11th grade down to 8th grade is a skill that very few people actually contain, because it's not as simple as changing words here and there. It really involves looking at how things are phrased and doing it very thoroughly, and it's something that very few people have the ability to do. There is, it's also, it can be a fairly labor-intensive, time-consuming, and it can be a rather expensive process. But if in a situation like this, it's a reasonable thing to explore and actually do. The other idea related to that I thought was very good, and is more common in Europe than it is in the U.S., is creating a supplement to the ICF. So you put together information. Let's say if you've got a 30-page ICF, you essentially boil it down to 3 or 4 pages where possible, and it has everything, the absolute essential that the subject needs to know. They're going to end up having to sign both of them, but it's a lot easier and far less intimidating than having to go through a 30-page ICF. Advertising is can be useful in certain therapeutic areas. If you're looking at, say, asthma patients, a lot of respiratory issues, I know skin issues, they can be, as in dermatology, frequently used advertising and can be very effective. Others, not so much. And that's going to be where you end up with the experience of the team will guide you as to how effective that might be and useful. In many countries, it's not legal to advertise for research in this way. So that's something else you need to keep in mind. Databases, like let's say you have marketing that goes for a national campaign, is very expensive, and I've never the cost to benefit ratio is extremely high. You have to be in a very unique patient population that you're exploring for that to really have a serious benefit. So again, it depends on what you do. I remember I had a colleague who spent $1 million on a national campaign and got a single patient. And I remember that was considered the $1 million subject. So that was more of a common experience than I've seen in other places, or with other methods of being able to increase enrollment. So as always, if there are any questions, and feel free to reach out to me. You can email me, you can text me or call me. Otherwise, I look forward to reading your posts on the discussion board. Thanks a lot.